All right, let's dive in. We're looking at the money stablecoin and the DeFi.money protocol today.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, the documentation you sent over suggests money is going to, well, shake things up in the stablecoin world, especially on those layer 2 chains everyone's talking about.
Definitely. What really catches my eye is how money is going beyond just pegging to the US dollar. It's designed to work across various blockchains, Optimism, Arbitrum, Base, you name it, and even uses a wider variety of assets as collateral.
Ah, speaking of collateral, the documents mentioned exotic types. What exactly does that mean in the money ecosystem? Sounds a bit mysterious.
Well, it's not so much that the assets themselves are out of the ordinary, it's more about using them on layer 2.
Okay, I'm following.
Think like tokenized real estate, maybe even intellectual property rights,
Yeah.
things that would be tough to use as collateral on Ethereum's main chain. Too slow, fees are too high.
Right, I get that.
But layer 2s change the game. Much faster, much more efficient, opens up a lot of possibilities.
So money utilizes these advantages, these layer 2 advantages, to unlock collateral sources that were kind of off limits before.
Exactly.
Pretty smart. But before we go too deep there, let's back up a bit. At its core, what is money? How is it different from, say, Tether or USDC, other stablecoins out there?
Sure. Money, it's a decentralized stablecoin, pegged to the US dollar. Think of it as a digital dollar, but built on blockchain tech. The key difference. Emphasis on permissionless access, meaning anyone can use it. And it's censorship resistant. No single entity can control it. Plus, it's designed with cross-chain functionality in mind. Moving between different blockchains, no problem.
That cross-chain aspect, I can see that being crucial. More and more layer 2 solutions popping up, alternative blockchains, it's getting crowded out there.
Absolutely.
But how does DeFi.money fit into this? Is that the engine behind money?
You got it. DeFi.money is the protocol, the base that money is built on, based on the CRV-USD architecture. It's a pretty innovative model that's becoming increasingly popular, particularly for its approach to stablecoin minting and managing collateral.
The documentation you sent, it talks a lot about how user-friendly DeFi.money is.
Yeah.
That's not something you hear too often in DeFi. It can be a bit intimidating for newcomers.
Yeah, it can be.
So how does DeFi.money make it easier?
It's about simplifying things. Processes like minting money or managing loans, they can be done with like one-click Zappy transactions, really intuitive.
Is that API, huh?
Yeah, and the user interface, clear, straightforward, highlights key info, potential risks, all that.
Sounds like they've taken these really powerful DeFi tools and made them, well, accessible to, regular people.
Exactly, lowering the barriers to entry, letting anyone, regardless of their tech skills, participate in DeFi. One way they do that, there's a system called automated loan protection, protects users from those crazy price swings you see sometimes.
Automated loan protection. Now that's interesting. How does that work? What kind of protection does it offer?
Well, it tackles the risk that comes with collateralized loans. You know, when the market's volatile, let's say you're using ETH as collateral to mint some money, suddenly ETH price drops, like really drops.
Happens all the time.
Right. This system, it automatically converts some of your ETH into stablecoins. Make sure your loan stays fully backed so you don't get liquidated, you don't lose your collateral.
A nice safety net, especially for people who are new to DeFi or, just a little scared of the market going haywire.
Right.
But how do they make this complex system user-friendly?
They've streamlined it. Remember those ZAT transactions? Part of that. Plus the interface. It's really well designed. Shows you all the info about your loan, collateral levels, any actions the system takes, all laid out clearly.
So even with these advanced features, they're not sacrificing user-friendliness.
Not at all. The goal is to make DeFi more approachable. Bridge that gap between the complex mechanics and the everyday user.
Right, and that ties into the massive growth of the stablecoin market, right? I read somewhere it could hit like $3 trillion, maybe even more in the next 5 years.
That's what they're saying. Huge market. Makes you wonder how money is going to compete. Lots of established players already.
Exactly.
But I think money is betting on its strengths. You know, user-friendly design, focus on layer 2 efficiency, and of course the cross-chain functionality. And that's where things get really interesting, especially when you factor in those chain wars we touched on earlier.
Chain wars. Okay, now you've said that a couple of times. Sounds a bit ominous, to be honest.
It's a bit of a battlefield out there, yeah. Basically, different blockchain networks are competing, users, developers, and most importantly, liquidity. It's like a battle for dominance in the whole DeFi space.
So like each chain wants to be the main hub, the place to go for all things DeFi.
That's the idea. Attract the most users, the highest total value locked, all that. And, Stablecoins are essential for DeFi, so the battle for stablecoin dominance, that's a major part of this war.
It sounds like money, with its cross-chain capabilities, its focus on layer twos, it's trying to position itself strategically in the middle of all this.
Exactly. It's not about picking a winning side. Money wants to be the bridge between these chains, make the flow of capital, the flow of users, smoother across the whole ecosystem.
Building bridges while the war rages around them. Bold strategy.
It is. But to really get the full picture, to understand what they're doing, we need to delve deeper. Talk about that exotic collateral, how it works with money's cross-chain functionality.
All right, lead the way. This is getting more and more fascinating by the minute.
Hmm.
We were talking about money positioning itself in these chain wars, with its cross-chain functionality. But I'm still a bit fuzzy on those exotic collateral types. What role do they play in all of this?
It goes back to what we discussed about layer twos, right? Faster transactions, cheaper fees compared to Ethereum's main chain.
Yeah.
That opens up a whole new range of assets that can be used as collateral when minting money.
So less about the assets themselves being, exotic and more about them being usable on these layer twos.
Exactly. Think about it. Something like, say, tokenized real estate, even intellectual property rights. Using those on Ethereum's main chain, not really feasible. Gas fees eat you alive.
Right.
But on a layer two, like Arbitrum, Optimism, suddenly it becomes much more practical.
Makes sense. But how does the cross-chain functionality of money tie into all this?
No, that's where things get really interesting. Picture this. You've got, let's say, tokenized real estate on Arbitrum,
Okay.
and you want to use that as collateral to mint some money. With money's cross-chain capabilities, you could then take that money, move it over to another chain, Optimism, Base, whatever you need, use it there, seamlessly.
So money isn't just bridging chains. It's also about unlocking all this liquidity that's kind of trapped in different places, making it flow throughout the whole EVM ecosystem.
Precisely. It's breaking down those walls that exist between blockchains. You're not stuck with just the options on one particular chain anymore. Wider pool of assets, more opportunities, all across the EVM landscape.
That's a big deal. Seems like money's playing a different game here, creating this more unified, interconnected DeFi experience, even while all these chain wars are going on.
You got it. They're not picking sides, they're building bridges, making it easier to interact between all these different ecosystems, even if they're, technically competing.
Smart. They're playing the long game, betting on a future where all these different chains are working together.
Exactly. A multi-chain future
Right.
where interoperability is key. And this strategy, it plays out in their approach to user experience too. Making DeFi easy, user-friendly, that brings in everyone. The DeFi veterans, sure, but also all those people who are just dipping their toes in for the first time.
It all ties together, doesn't it?
It does.
We talked about that massive growth projection for the stablecoin market. Potentially 3 trillion, maybe more in the next few years.
Hard to even imagine.
It is. How does money plan to stand out? Compete in this crowded space? So many stablecoins already out there.
Well, I think their focus on user experience, the whole cross-chain functionality, that gives them a real edge. It's not just another US dollar-pegged stablecoin. They're aiming to be like the stablecoin for the multi-chain world.
They're building the infrastructure for this future where value just moves freely between all these different blockchains. Doesn't matter who wins those chain wars.
That's the key. It's not just about grabbing market share. It's about building the future of DeFi, making it open, accessible, connecting everything.
Powerful stuff. But, every new tech comes with its own set of hurdles, right? Risks, things they need to overcome. What are some of the challenges money might face as they try to achieve these goals?
Well, one of the big ones is adoption, getting people to actually use it.
Right.
You've got all these established stablecoins already out there, each with their own advantages. Money has to convince both users and developers, get them to buy into the platform, integrate it into what they're building.
So it's not just about building a good product, it's about creating a community around it, a whole ecosystem.
Exactly. And that's why that focus on user experience is so important. Make money simple, easy to use. Then they can attract all sorts of users, from those, deep in the DeFi world to folks who are just starting out.
It's a multi-pronged approach, isn't it? The technology, the user experience, the community. But what about regulations? The DeFi space is, it's still evolving. Governments are still figuring out what to do with it all.
That's a big one, for sure. Stablecoins in particular, they've got the attention of regulators, potential impact on financial stability, monetary policy, all that. Money has to navigate that carefully, make sure everything they're doing is above board, complies with all the rules.
So even if the tech is solid, regulatory uncertainty could still throw a wrench in the works.
Definitely. DeFi is still in its early days, lots of unknowns out there. But despite those challenges, I think the vision behind money is compelling. A multi-chain future, value flowing freely between blockchains. It's a powerful idea.
Yeah, definitely worth exploring. We've talked a lot about the tech, the potential, but what about the people behind money? Who are they? What's their vision for this whole DeFi space?
That's a great question, but to be honest, the documentation you sent didn't really cover that.
Hmm.
Doesn't really tell us much about the team, their background, their specific vision.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Makes you think about transparency, accountability. How can users trust a project if they don't know who's running it?
It's a valid concern, and it shows why doing your own research is so important. Due diligence. Look, the team being anonymous might raise some red flags, but remember, DeFi is all about trustless systems.
Yeah.
The code, it's open source. Anyone can audit it. All the mechanisms, they're transparent.
So even if you don't know the developers personally, you can still examine the tech itself, assess the risks.
Absolutely. It's a different way of thinking about trust, right? In traditional finance, it's all about institutions, reputations. DeFi, the trust is in the code, the
Yeah.
community, the underlying mechanics.
That's a pretty fundamental shift. It seems like money is this interesting example of that, this tension between being anonymous but also transparent, decentralized but still needing some kind of accountability.
Exactly. And that makes it a really interesting case study. As DeFi evolves, it challenges us to think differently, new ways of building trust, new ways of governing, all in this world where those traditional structures are being, well, disrupted.
It's fascinating, and it makes me want to dig even deeper.
I'm with you on that.
We've talked a lot about the tech behind money and where it could potentially go. But I'm curious about, well, the human side of things, the people building it, the ideas driving them. That's what I really want to explore next.
I think that's a great place to go from here. Let's dive into that.
We've really gone deep on money and the DeFi.money protocol, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
From those exotic collateral types on layer 2 to the whole chain wars thing. It's pretty clear this project is, well, they're aiming high.
What strikes me is how they're tackling this core DeFi problem, interoperability.
Yeah.
The more blockchains we have, the harder it gets for assets, applications to talk to each other, to work together smoothly. That's got to change.
It's like they're laying down the tracks,
Right.
connecting all these different blockchain ecosystems. So value, information, it can all flow more freely.
That's a great analogy, and that's where the whole cross-chain functionality comes in. Think about it. Moving your money between Ethereum, Arbitrum, Optimism, Base, no problem. Wherever the best opportunities are, that's where you go.
A universal passport for the world of DeFi.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. But we've talked a lot about the tech. What about the people building this thing? We were about to dive into the team behind money. Who are they?
That's where things get a bit tricky. The documentation you provided, it doesn't really say much about the team, their background, their vision, any of that.
Really? Huh. That's not uncommon in DeFi, is it? The whole anonymity thing, decentralization.
Yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, though, isn't it?
It is. It makes you wonder about transparency, accountability. How can users trust a project if they don't even know who's running it?
It's a good question,
Right.
and it highlights why it's so important to do your homework, your own research, due diligence, all that. But, the fact that the team is anonymous, it doesn't necessarily mean anything nefarious is going on. Remember, the core of DeFi is about trustless systems.
Okay.
The code is all out in the open source. Anyone can look at it, audit it. The mechanisms, how everything works, it's all transparent.
So even if you don't know the developers, you can still, kick the tires, so to speak, see how it all works under the hood.
Exactly. It's a different way of thinking about trust. Traditional finance, it's all about institutions, reputations, who can we trust? But in DeFi, the trust is in the code itself, the community, the underlying mechanics.
That's a big shift.
Yeah.
It seems like money is kind of, well, it's right in the middle of this whole thing. This tension between being anonymous, but also transparent, decentralized, but still needing some level of accountability.
It's a microcosm of the DeFi space as a whole, and that makes it a fascinating case study. As this whole space evolves, it forces us to rethink things, new ways to build trust, new ways to govern. And it's all happening in this world where those traditional structures, those old ways of doing things, well, they're being turned upside down.
It really is a new frontier, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it makes me even more curious to see where it all goes.
Me too.
We've covered a lot of ground here, the tech behind money, its potential, the challenges it faces, all that. But at the end of the day, What's the one thing you'd want our listeners to take away from this deep dive?
I'd say the most important thing to remember is this. Money, it's not just a stablecoin. It's a reflection of everything that's happening in DeFi right now. All the trends, the excitement, the anxieties, it's all there. It's a reminder that this is just the beginning. We're in the early stages of a financial revolution. And the rules, they're still being written.
So it's not just about understanding money itself. It's about understanding what it represents, what it tells us about the future of finance.
Exactly. Money is a catalyst. It forces us to ask bigger questions about trust, transparency, this whole idea of interoperability, even what value means in this new decentralized world.
Big questions indeed. Well, it sounds like the money story is just getting started. We'll be following it closely, and we encourage all of you listening to keep exploring, keep learning, and keep forming your own opinions about this exciting new world of DeFi. That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. Until next time.